Welcome, everyone. My name is Nora McGinnis. I co-chair the Exhibitions Committee of Surface Design Association, a membership nonprofit focused on contemporary fiber and textile art. I'm delighted to welcome you to this week's Textile Talk Interplay Limitless Connections with our guests Rena Wood, Lindsay Schusler, Gian Kim, and Annet Couwenberg. Textile Talks webinars are brought to you by the International Quilt Museum, Quilt Alliance, Studio Art Quilt Associates, and Surface Design Association. So thank you. First, a few housekeeping announcements to start us off. As this is a webinar, your screens and mics are not active or showing. Please do chime in the chat though and tell us where you're tuning in from. Chat comments can be seen by everyone, participants and panelists throughout the program. We also welcome your questions, which we will answer at the end of all of the artist presentations. Please submit them in the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen so that they'll be saved for that time. We are honored to bring you free and inspiring Textile Talks programming each week, and we respectfully ask that you be courteous as you engage with speakers, moderators, and other participants. So please use the Q&A for questions, the chat box for greeting others, and survey for commentary or ways that we can improve. If during the artist presentations you'd prefer not to see notifications from the chat popping up, you can just click on that chat button and toggle them on or off. With that said, today's Textile Talk celebrates 3 exhibitions highlighting the very best of contemporary fiber arts, and I'm so excited to share them with you. As I introduce today's program and speakers, you'll see a slideshow of images from Interplay, Surface Design Association's annual student and member exhibitions, this year combined under one roof at the Dairy Barn Arts Center in Athens, Ohio. So first you'll see here work from the student category of our exhibition, and after a brief switch, work from the members category. If you want to go back and see something in more detail, you can also see all the work from the exhibitions on SDA's website, the link to which will pop up in the chat here. So Interplay honors the diverse range of approaches within fiber art and looks towards a future informed by the past while bringing together ideas for fresh reflection, reinterpretation, and a deeper understanding. Today, we'll hear from Interplay Award winners Lindsay Schusler and Gian Kim, getting to know their work a little bit better, as well as our exhibition juror, Annet Couwenberg. In conjunction with Interplay, SDA had the opportunity this year to sponsor a concurrent solo exhibition at the Dairy Barn, something that we were thrilled to be able to offer to our members. So today we will also hear from Reena Wood, who will discuss her exhibition Echoes, in which she pays tribute to textile histories and past makers. Reena will give us a look inside the ways that she imagines repetitive handwork and its connection to time. Our goal with all 3 of these exhibitions and today's program is to feature artists who encourage us to think in new ways while also honoring tradition. So thank you so much for joining us today. With that, I will turn things over to our juror, Annet Couwenberg, who will share a few comments about the exhibition. An artist educator, Annet Couwenberg's inimitable curiosity has prompted her to pursue the ongoing conversations between traditional textile production and digital technologies throughout her art and teaching career. Couwenberg's art, informed by her early work in the fashion industry, is diverse, ranging from sculptural forms to jacquard weavings, and even to work with fish fossils and skeletons during her time as a Smithsonian Artist Research Fellow at the National Museum of Natural History. She embraces a multi-directional knowledge exchange between new and established, creating art that visualizes ways to protect and preserve traditional practices while also expanding upon them. Born in the Netherlands, Couwenberg moved to the United States to receive MFA degrees at Syracuse University and Cranbrook Academy of Art. She has worked internationally, including in Korea, Turkey, Germany, Italy, Portugal, Poland, and the Netherlands. So welcome, Anna. I will turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Nora, and hello, everyone. I would like to start by thanking the Surface Design Association for keeping us all on our toes and providing us with so much valuable information, shows, talks, thoughts, and inspirational images over all these years. And a big shout out to all the artists in this show. Congratulations. Your work is truly incredible. It's an honor to be here and to have been the juror of this exhibition. I know I'm maybe preaching to the choir, but let's dive in. Textiles have shaped our world and our lives, haven't they? Just look at the amazing images on your screen right now. Great work is being done. Textiles does coexist with us. It serves as a very powerful medium for mediation, memory, and transformation. And this show highlights that beautifully. It is amazing how the artists here embrace the power and tradition of textiles while pushing the boundaries in such diverse ways. They've all taken the fluidity and the malleability of textiles to new heights. Textiles and its very important inherent qualities can expose an object's materiality, but it can also tell stories. It can even serve as structures themselves. And as evident by the numerous examples in this fabulous exhibition, you will see a lot more represented than I just mentioned. You will also see fascinating interplay between the softness of textiles and harder materials. You also see textiles that convey political messages, commemorating moments in time or family gatherings, or they weave threads into architectural gestures. The possibilities in this medium are endless. These incredible works remind me of what Giuliano Bruno discussed in her work Surface. It's not just about the materials themselves. It really, as she says, it is about the substance of their relationships. How do textiles appear as skins on people, on walls, in connection with each other, or just hanging from one point in architecture? What happens when you project a video on felt? Or how does material react to a structure underneath it? Textures change, meaning changes, and surface tension can become almost concrete. This brings us back to the meaning of textiles. I want you to think about that folded fabric, that piece of fabric that you have on your table, or clothing that hangs in your closet. The meaning changes when a sweater is folded on a shelf versus worn on the body. Threads against hard or soft surfaces transform their significance. The Interplay exhibition reveals this hidden relationship. And they do too challenge us to reconsider the dividing lines between work, world, and viewer. In my own work, I often think about the process of becoming, the labor, the accumulation, the systems, the evolution of a structure. And textiles gives me the opportunity to talk about becoming. When we talk about becoming, we can think about during the reciprocal conversation with the material and the hand, and for me, even with the computer, or any tool in between. It all happens during the making process for me. So let me give you an example of how I think about this in my own work. As Deleuze, the philosopher, says, when he speaks of becoming in his book, The Fold, it manifests itself in the fold, he talks about. How do we evolve? The revealing and the concealing, the hidden and the obvious, the past and the future. In this incredible generative medium of textiles, the dot next to the dots becomes the line. The accumulation of images and motifs, the repetitions, the transformation of materials, they change. And they become almost the meaning of itself. The accumulation of individual threads architectonically constructed on top of each other become a constructed whole. It all prompts us to re-examine and transform the syntax of our social imagery, all to understand what lies underneath, and hopefully understanding what and who came before. In my own work, I think a lot about whose shoulders I'm standing on. For me, it helps in trying to understand oneself and what I can become. In the end, for me, it's all about ways of seeing and becoming. And I think you recognize that in a lot of the works here too. So the last thing I'm going to say, let's celebrate this textile world. And let's celebrate all of us. And please promise me to stay on the fringe. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Annet. So next we will hear from two of our artists from the show, but just as a reminder, you can go onto the SDA website and see all of these works from the show at your leisure and browse them in your own time. So thank you so much, Annet. Next, we will hear from our first place award winner in our members category, Lindsay Schusler. Welcome, Lindsay. So Lindsay is an artist living and working in Salem, Massachusetts. Her creative work uses wool felt to investigate normative forms of interaction and interdependent relationships. Her research interests include the complex material histories of textile objects, as well as their cultural implications. She earned her MFA from Cranbrook Academy of Art in 2018, and her work has been shown nationally. She has also participated in residencies at the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art and the Vermont Studio Center, the latter supported by a Wingate Fellowship for sculptural artists working in craft media. So over to you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Nora, and thanks to everybody at the Textile Talks for putting this together. I'm gonna share my screen here. So for this brief talk, in the Interplay exhibition, I have one piece, but I work in usually a body of work mentality where things are kind of shifting back and forth. So I'm going to talk about the body of work that piece belongs to, which I call bodily autonomy. The piece in the show is this very large, well, it's a chain link fence with vertebrae in it. And the whole thing is made out of wool felt, with the exception of the underneath structure of the fence, which is actually a PVC thing that I made. So this work was all shown together in kind of its final presentation, if you will. Not that any work is ever really final, because I'll take this and it'll be something else. This was shown at the Stonehouse Art Gallery in 2021. So most of this work was made kind of at the tail end of the pandemic. And it was also made at the beginning of when I was pregnant with my first child. And so there kind of is this weird thing happening all around me and also inside me when I'm making this work, that I'm thinking about how, I have this one body, but it is constantly being not necessarily infiltrated, but in relation to everything that is in my environment and everything that I eat. And all of those things some of them are in my control, but a lot of them are more in the control of the collective, or are more in control of people who have more authority over space and medicine and just our society than necessarily I as an individual do. So I'm going to walk you through kind of the thinking behind the work and how it was made, because this is a textile talk and I like to share the nitty-gritty. And then I'll show you some more of the finished pieces at the end. So I started this kind of thought. I do make a lot of work in wool felt. I have been accused of being the crazy felt lady more than once. And so I kind of have this love affair with it because it is in itself so many of the things that I am interested in. So wool, of course, is made from sheep, but it's not just this like nice natural thing that comes off of a sheep to me. It's this evidence of a kind of coevolution, or a putting together of human history and how we relate to the earth and all of our natural resources. So the sheep are not just sheep, they are of course something we rely on. So we can live in different places, we can do different things. Our society is shaped by these relationships that we have and by everyday objects, really. So with that in the back of your mind, I also wanted to just give a little shout out to the felt traditions of the Scandinavian area, mostly Norway, and also of the Middle East. The traditions that I learned how to make felt from and that I kind of reference in the idea of where this came from are they're important because it's how I learned to make it, but they're also important because it's where some of the concepts come from. And so let's see, yes. So with this body of work, I wanted to talk about kind of how the body is affected by the environment. And I started really literally, like, I'm gonna make some kidneys and I'm gonna make a stomach and some, that green one is supposed to be a colon, all right? And somehow I settled on making these vertebrae. So I would, this is before I know what on earth this body of work is about. I'm just like going to the chiropractor and trying to decide how big vertebrae are so I know how big to make the models. And I'm like looking at anatomical books, trying to print out pictures the right size so that I can try to make these are needle felted. So I have an acid dye the wool roving before I use it to make anything that's needle felted. And these have this small metal armature on the inside. I think that this picture of an armature is one that didn't end up getting used. And so at some point I'm thinking about the body, but then I'm wanting to relate it to kind of these really banal everyday experiences that are a little more literal in if you look at them, you might think, oh yeah, I would walk around a fence. Or I would be like things that tell you what to do in public space. So I'm trying to use signage and like things that you would see but not necessarily think of that you would then react to. So you have a more to bring to light like that relationship with the environment around you. And so in my usual fashion, I have like a very small sample of like, okay, maybe these are the colors, maybe these are the textures that I'm going to use. Go to Home Depot and take pictures of like 700 different kinds of fence. And then I decide on one that I like and use that to cut out all of these things. I was told, you could use a laser cutter to do this. Well, I could, but I decided it needed to happen right then, and then it did. This is kind of another example of the same lines as the fence. And I will talk a little bit about the colors here. So I use wool felts, right? It's US domestic wool. It is normally this it's beige, light beige color. And I think when you present it as that color, people think, oh, well, this is nice. This is comfortable. This is about domesticity, but in a very friendly way. And my thoughts on this, comfortable material are not that. So by using these colors that are really striking and they're kind of, to me, I actually hate them. Like, I don't like these colors. I don't want them in my house. And they're also the colors of like some of them are directly from this kind of land of traffic signs and construction material. And then some of them are kind of just plays off of that kind of color. But to me, they're a bit they're a bit unsettling, and they're also, I think they relate to looking more like a toy. So I actually had this piece that I made in a previous series called Toxic Playground. That was like a bean bag that you sat on, was these colors. And that's kind of where I was borrowing from my past self into this color scheme. I make a lot of felt, but in a lot of my previous work, I was making like vessels, or if you've ever seen, a cat cocoon, yeah, or hat. So that, like, the basic idea of a hat is that you're making two pieces of felt, but they're connected to each other. So you start off with something 2D and you make it all at once, and when you're done, you've made something 3-dimensional. So this works really well for hats and socks, things that are kind of like tube or pocket shaped. So when I went to think about this work, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make a traffic cone. That sounds good. That sounds like a good place to start. I think I made 4 traffic cones before I decided that just was not going to work, and that I was instead going to do something unusual, which was to reverse pattern a traffic cone and a real traffic cone, and then use flat stock that I had made and sew it from that. So that was an interesting, like, kind of turn. I did want to show this this very strange green stuff on the other side is when I dye the wool roving that is loose, it's very difficult to actually rinse all of the dye out without making felt. So when I'm gonna do something where I'm felting around a 3D object, like I did here with the PVC pipe, I'm basically washing the dye out and making the felt at the same time, which looks gross, but is entertaining. And so on the right here, I have the setup for making the fence panel. And so this is my studio table, and chain link fence is knit, which is kind of like an interesting, textile thing to be noticing about a chain link fence. But it isn't knit on like the way that you can knit with needles, because that would make a bunch of squares instead of a bunch of diamonds. And so I'm here on this like piece of foam that I've gridded out, kind of tacking with little pins and making the loops to make them all the right size without pins. And this is kind of where the rough idea of what this body of work is comes into form. So I've decided, you know what? I have a full set of vertebrae. No idea what I'm doing with them. I don't know what the final presentation is. I just I had a vague idea, and then I have to make it and see how it becomes, and then what it relates to, because so much of my work is about relationship. And then I ended up, I made the fence. I didn't know that they were going to go together. I dyed this wool yarn green that I had, and that was before anything. That was the first thing that I did, was say, you know what, this yarn, it really needs to be green, and I don't know why, and I'll figure it out. But this nice picture here on the right has a kind of a really badly written list of all of the parts that I've made that I feel like they go together. And so some of this work became literal pairs of anatomical parts with things from public space, and then some of it became a little more abstract, the later stuff. So this again is the piece in the show. I'm not original with titles, so the whole body of work is called Bodily Autonomy, and this one is just called Green Fence. I've tried to number things, but then I forget which number is which thing in a series. So this one, kind of what I didn't expect, and what I then really discovered in the making and decided to run with, was that when I wove the vertebrae back into the fence, so I undid it and redid it to get the vertebrae in all the different places, that they would then affect all of the different shapes within that space and kind of make it even more of this relationship where one thing is affecting another. So this piece is one of those fence pieces. You can see how it eventually came together. And then this, the more anatomical form is modeled after an intestine. And so it's kind of like a ruffle. It's constructed like a ruffle. And if you can, you might be able to tell that like the more anatomical parts have a different texture. So they're made of felt that is less dense than these other more crinkly textured, brightly dyed pieces. I did eventually actually put the flags outside of the gallery. It's a very small gallery, so that worked out very well. But there were probably several renditions of things that they could go on to be in the gallery or somehow be related to something else. And then I said, no, you know what? I think in the process, I learned that the felt really carries that kind of bodily association with it without having to have anything else. So I kind of started relying on that more in the later work of the series. You saw the first iteration of these in a different picture, but now there's in their finished form, they're 3-dimensional. And this is kind of a close-up of that like really dense, very visceral texture that everything has in this group. So there's actually, it never comes across in pictures, but there is actually still vegetable matter in the wool. The wool that I get is kind of like it's already been, washed and carded. It comes from a bunch of like local farms that basically they don't really need it. They don't have enough sheep to be like, I'm doing a fiber farm. They have sheep more for land maintenance. And so there are a couple of wool mills in the country, maybe like 5, that will take this stuff and they'll make a product of domestic wool that you can buy. But it still has a little bit of like grass in it that you can find if you look close enough. So this is that traffic cone piece. And if you're wondering how it stands up, you did see the armature for it earlier with that little ball on a stick. And so it's kind of like this embracing of the slouchiness and kind of the bodiliness of it. Nora's coming back on, which tells me I'm probably supposed to be done talking. But this is my last slide, and I just wanted to thank everybody and note that most of the pictures that I have shown you are a credit to Kylie Price at the Stonehouse.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. It's really great to get a peek into your studio process and also the way your mind works. Thanks for letting us in on that. Awesome. All right, next we are going to switch over and we'll hear from Gian Kim, the first place award winner in our student category. Welcome, Gian. So Gian is a Korean woman and fiber artist originally from South Korea and currently based in New York City. She develops her artistic curiosity through the intricate world of embroidery, weaving, felting, painting, and sculpture. Here, she builds an imaginative playground where the mundane transforms into the extraordinary and spontaneity is the starting point. In tandem with soft and flexible fibers, Jiang's artistic exploration extends to encompass the vast possibilities of hard fiber materials. This expansion marks a deliberate departure from the familiar terrain of softness and challenges traditional notions associated with fiber art. So Jiang, I will turn it over to you. And Jiang is joining us from Crete, so thank you so much.
Yeah. Hello, nice to meet you all. I'm happy to participate in Textile Talks. I'm Gian Kim, and I am fiber artist. I also work with painting and sculptures based on textiles. My work is informed by my playful sensibility. I mean, in my life beyond the studio, I usually progress through my plans or ambition in a very stable way. However, in the studio, the creative process is a kind of emotive, liberating me from convolution to achieve this, my stability. In the absence of definitive answers, I craft my own solution, creating a sense of freedom and joy found within the process itself. So next page, please. Yeah, so before I start, I will explain my introduction. So I have been working on garden series that embodies this positive emotion in pattern and extends into environment designed to provide this invisible emotion into tangible textile artworks. The use of neon color, combination twill pattern, it's a kind of like abstract pattern, and diverse texture are main characteristic to convey my happiness and playfulness. So this is my garden series. My garden is a vibrant and dynamic playground, reflecting my deep-seated aspiration to embody a bright emotion. An overflow of joy and energy and enthusiasm is inspired by my garden and mirrors my unstrained curiosity. I create artwork that inspired a playful sense of interaction between sculptor and viewers. So my vision for engagement is an emotional hug station with fiber art furniture. This symbolic space represents more than just physical comfort and embodies the spirit of togetherness and serves as a connection in my garden. And also my desire for a tactile level stems from my secret recipe for materials and the intimate connection between myself and my medium. Through them beyond the visual aesthetic, I understand the material to add a sensibility and sensory element, allowing people to experience community engagement with my garden in a fun and playful way. My work is based on my playful instinct as a kind of playful sensibility. I mean, playful instincts is my creative process. It is not just destination for making, but a transformative process into the heart of material exploration. It is an opportunity for me to feel, understand, and express the intangible instinct. Through them, I'm trying to expand chance in a textile texture. The inclusion of hard fiber material introduces a contrasting element that challenges the traditional notion like softness associated with fiber art. Thus, exploring rigidity and durability of fibers material open up new realm of structure possibilities. On the right are some samples of textile sculpture that I made myself. The top one is a textile developed using sausage casing material and some glues, which is a very water resistant. And the second one is a shape created by weaving and then fixing the shape with hand stitches. The last one is inspired by paper making techniques. It is very strong and efficient for making textile sculpture. So I use this technique as a very important element in my art furniture part. So this result of mixing fabric, yarn, and glue is very similar to the texture of stone. So through lots of experiment and samples, I realized that permeability and flexibility can be determined depending on the density. Okay, the next. Actually, CMC is a kind of cellulose. It's a kind of glue. Yeah. And this is a August. The name is August Among My Garden series. On the right, you can see the some letter. This is some part of my poem. So I will read the whole poem for you guys. So, a place of emotion where creativity sets sail, energy dances, joy takes flight, and curiosity blooms. Curiosity, a vibrant force, fuels the journey I undertake. In the rim of fiber and thread, my happiness finds its form. No goal to bind, no tension to bear. Just the joy of creation where playful instinct is my foundation. Playfulness emerging, taking a carefree direction, a departure from reality, weighty reflection. Through colors and form, my story unfolds. So I create my playful instinct or formation by translating the instinctual expression into tangible and visually engaging sculptures. For example, I give dynamism and movement a static chair by attaching wheels to it and combining it with bicycle seats. For the parts that people can touch, and I choose the soft texture. So which is the great advantage of textiles. So on the left, on the air, you can see the fellow. So there is a lot of volume. So could you pass the next page? Yeah. So I use the combination twill weaving pattern using 4 and 6 shafts to create an abstract pattern. This produces an illusion-like pattern with depth. I use a felt yarn for weaving as it allows maximum softness, particularly where people interact directly with my pieces. Also, I layer using a sewing machine over the weaving, imparting volume and depth to the woven textures. So depending on techniques, I try to show multiple texture. So in some part, people can feel the softness in the weaving. In other, they can feel hardness and strength in the paper making part. Okay, next, please. Yeah, so lastly, my important visual language is neon color to express the dynamic energy and potential. The interplay of neon color serves as visual vitamin for me. So by integrating sunlight into my textiles, vivid color create a lively feel. Also, I build color and texture gradation where color mix optically and color has dimension. So based on my artistic styles, I work with a wide length of fibers and hybrid material to explore hard and soft textures and layered colors. So yeah, this is my work. Thank you all for listening to my presentation. And it has been an honor to share my work and creative journey with you today. So yeah, especially thank you to Astrid, Nora, and Surface Design Association for making this opportunity possible. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jiyoung, and yeah, giving us some more insight into your work. It's really lovely to see. Thanks. So finally, we will hear from Reena Wood, and she will share with us some thoughts about her companion exhibition, Echoes. So Reena is a fiber artist and associate professor of fiber art at Tennessee Tech University's Appalachian Center for Craft. She received her BFA from the Kansas City Art Institute and MFA from the Department of Craft and Material Studies at Virginia Commonwealth University. Reena's intricately stitched hand embroidery and art installations have been shown nationally in solo and group exhibitions, and she has participated in artist residencies around the country. She's also the recipient of the Tennessee Arts Commission's Individual Artist Fellowship in Craft for 2023. So welcome, Reena, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Let me get my screen ready. Oops. Okay, hopefully that's visible. I see that we're running a little short on time as well, so I will try to be as brief as possible. Thank you so much.
Right, Reena, no worries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me. It was quite an honor to be chosen by Surface Design Association and the Dairy Barn for a solo exhibit. It really was an honor to go there and install the show. So thank you. I'm going to show you work from the Dairy Barn and also professional images that were taken from a previous time when a lot of this work was shown. A very similar exhibition called Echoes. And I'll just briefly read a little bit about what Echoes, the title of the exhibition in this body of work, means. Echoes relates to the textile materials and patterns, reminding us of people and places we may have forgot. It refers to the repetition and reworking of the handwork process over and over again to try and find meaning through obsessive making. Echoes and memories are similar in my mind, that with each reverberation, the memory or echo slowly changes or fades away. The first piece that I'm showing, this is at the Dairy Barn, is a very large hand embroidery on black silk. And this piece was actually funded in part by a professional development grant from SDA about 4 years ago. And I have been working on this piece on and off for that entire time. So this is the first time it's being shown. It is a two-sided piece. So if you are at the Dairy Barn, feel free to peek behind it. I plan to continue working on this piece and adding more embroidery to it and embellishing the back even further. Here's a close-up of the stitching. The title of the piece is Running Recollections. All of my embroidered work is made with a running stitch. I like that the image or the tangle that's created looks a bit like the thread that I'm using. The way that the process of stitching these pieces comes together is visualized through the work. So there's a close-up, a detail of the work, and then a photo of my two installers who are also my parents, and they show up every summer or every time I have an exhibition to help me install the work. It also gives you a bit of the scale of this piece. I believe it's about 10 foot by 10 foot. So this is the first time it's being shown. I do plan to work on it more and install it again in the future. The next piece is in the same style. It's called 36 Lines. Like Lindsay said about titling work, it's not my strongest suit, but there were 36 pieces in this installation originally. I had developed this style of embroidery and I kind of wanted to see what else I could do, how much more I could express with just this single line. I'm very obsessed with line and you know, what small amount could be suggested through just a small detail. So it kind of forms and unforms as you move through it. This is the abridged version. I believe there's only about 30 pieces on view. When it was fully installed in Kansas City, this is how it wrapped around the wall and you were able to kind of walk and see it forming and unforming as you moved through. And a couple of details of this work. Next is a piece called Cellular Memory. So these images, I have to admit, are from an iPhone. I haven't taken my professional photos yet at the Dairy Barn, so please forgive me for that. One of the things that I thought was really exciting when I got to the Dairy Barn is that they still have, well, they're using the architecture. So I was able to use the architecture to help install this work. So the piece on the far wall is called Cellular Memory. It's suspended from the beams of the barn. And I really appreciated that I could manipulate the shadow, so it had that secondary image behind it. Again, line and pattern are two things that I really love. These are all vintage pieces, vintage textiles that I've dyed and then embroidered onto. So where there was negative space in the textile, that's where my embroidery started. The title, Cellular Memory, is really about just where memories lie in our bodies. Like many textile artists, memory is always a very prevalent theme in my work. To me, it's a mystery. It's something that is hard to grasp and hard to understand, why memories change and why we lose them over time potentially. So this piece came from the saying that I heard, when the mind forgets, the hands remember. So for a lot of us who do repetitive work, hand work, stitching, textile work, our hands may remember longer than the thoughts that went into it. And so this is about memories living in the body. This is the back side, a close-up. So on the back of the work, also if you peek behind it, you can see that I've added a lot of threads to kind of show the dichotomy between the front side with a very clean, organized, seemingly perfect embroidery, and then the back side having this sort of more realistic grasping for connections and creating sort of that mass of memory and thoughts. Another version of this installation, a lot of these pieces that you'll see, the installations, I have a beginning date and no end date, or through the present. These are pieces that I want to continuously work on and add to and reinstall in different ways. I like the idea that over time it will shift and change. I also like the idea that with embroidered work, and those of you who also do embroidery and things know that seeing things like this on a larger scale for me can be overwhelming and feel very moving. So hopefully that's coming across a little bit. But I love to create that large scale of something that's quiet, but also, immensely time consumer or labor intense. And a couple more install shots of this piece. The next work is called Portraits. These are framed vintage textiles that I've embroidered into. Again, working with the architecture of the dairy barn, I hung them from the beam and let them kind of float up and down and exaggerated the shadows on the wall behind it. These are more formally shown as if, the textiles holding the memory of the past maker, each individual, each family portrait, each person being framed into an individual piece. And here they are as a grid. The embroidered work that I'm doing here is similar to the black silk pieces with the line that tangles. I'm doing a running stitch and creating the sense of dimension by ending a stitch and then beginning another row. So one row follows the next. And I'm beginning my embroidery where the maker left a space. And so I begin by outlining and then just filling in over and over again. And a close-up of kind of that dimension, and you can see the running stitch floating around, moving around. This piece is called Dissemination. It began during the COVID quarantine. I think I needed to get my hands on a different material than embroidery, and so I started working with wire. I was coiling wire and then sewing it together, fully surrounding pieces of vintage lace. I think I was really affected by seeing imagery of the coronavirus, and so that microscopic image kept popping up, and so I was really trying to play on that micro macro sense that you get in this presentation or this installation. There's a close-up of the coiled wire and then using a thinner wire to attach each row one by one. Again, obsessive making, repetition, meditation are all things that are very important to my studio practice, which I'm sure some of my fellow SDA members can also agree with or understand. Finally, this piece is called The Weight of Memory. It is a coiled piece. It is cotton core with black acrylic yarn. My goal in this was to draw out the lace patterns that I saw in a lot of the vintage textiles that I collect and use in my other work, and create something much more playful that feels almost immediate. But for those of you who have also made coiled pieces, you know that it is very labor intensive, wrapping every single piece of yarn surrounding the cotton core. The dairy barn, again, they have this great window, so I hung it right in front of the window. I left it up to them if they wanted to open the shades or close them, so hopefully it will be seen both ways. I like that it's kind of floating through the space, and again, you can kind of see a little bit of the shadow down there on the ground that is being projected. Here's the same work installed in a different gallery setting on a white wall. I've said this a couple of times before, but I feel like this is taking the black Sharpie and kind of drawing a huge version of lace onto the wall. So I like that it feels a lot more immediate and playful than some of the other work that I showed or that I make in a close-up of the coiled pieces. Each time I install the work, I use the installation to help affect how I'm going to reinstall it. So the work is very mutable. It can change, it can take on different meaning depending on where it's at, but always memory, sort of the idea of echoes of materials and thoughts is prevalent. Okay, and I think I was right on 10 minutes. Sorry, I went a little bit shorter there.
No worries.
But now we have time for questions. So thank you so much for listening, and please, let me know, reach out if you have any other questions about my work.
Thank you so much, Reena. It's really great to get get to see that exhibition and get an insight into your practice. So just FYI for panelists and attendees, we will go till 3:05, so we do have a few minutes for questions. So if you have a question, please go ahead and put it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will get that in rotation. Lindsay and Jiyoung, if you want to join us on screen too, we will go ahead and get started. So I have a question to start us all off. So much of our theme of interplay when the committee was coming up with this was concerned with this conversation between tradition and innovation that is so prevalent in fiber arts in general in the field. So I'm curious to hear from any of you, if you want to chime in, where you see your work in that conversation, or how you see that conversation playing out in your work.
I would love to take it. First, I want to say thank you. What an amazing work of all three of you. Thank you for doing that. I think for me, coming out of textiles and in the craft medium, I always think about what is the history of tools, and then how does that connect with innovation? What does that mean in innovation? I do believe, and I always think about this, is like when the needle got innovated, that was a biggie, right? And so I'm always thinking about how we grab a tool to make things, and we can start asking questions. And a lot of times what we all have is like, oh, that tool doesn't work, I'm going to make my own tool. That's innovation. So I think that's really, for me, I know that a lot of people see it as technology, but I see it more as innovation, as, oh, that doesn't work, I'm going to customize my tool. And we all do it. We all of course we do that. So I think for me, innovation and in connection with technology, we have these tools out there right now, and all I want to do is understand how the computer sees the world and how I can use that new innovation. So very short. I mean, I think a lot about that in my own work, but let's think about it as a tool. That's how I think.
Yeah, it is a big question.
Yeah, it's a very big question of like textiles and technology. Yes. But I always think about it as, you know, in our field, a lot of the technology, so to speak, that we use is actually very, very old, if not ancient, or you know, like you can't even find the history of its origins, just because either it disintegrated or they didn't think enough to write it down because it was just so everyday. So I like to think that when we're working with stuff like embroidery or felt, that we're kind of taking from the previous and like expanding it into now. So I might not make felt the way that people did before. I do kind of what Annette was saying, where you're making new tools in order to do it with what you have. But in the same kind of by doing that, you're continuing the innovation that other people kind of started.
Thanks, Lindsay. Any other thoughts to chime in with?
Sorry, I
Oh.
had a dog barking, so I was waiting for her to stop so that I could unmute. I agree with a lot of what Annette said about innovation and technology. I feel like I am using materials and tools that are very old. There's nothing innovative about them, but every time I pick them up and use them, I'm trying to think of, you know, something new, what else I can do with it, how I can change the medium, while also preserving the past and holding on to those past makers and the materials.
Can I add something? I mean, I think a lot about this in my own work. I think about the computer as being material. And I think about technology as being material. If it is digital material or if it's real material. But in my own work, I really, when I go to the laser cutter, for instance, I see the laser cutter almost as the translation of weaving. You know, it's an algorithm. It's like, again, the dot next to the dot, the line on top of the line. It's the same, the algorithm works, encoding works. And we forget that innovation and technology came, I mean, the Jacquard loom is not the first computer, but it is the predecessor. And in textiles, we have done this for so long. So I think we, you know, thinking that technology or innovation or all this is foreign to us, it's actually part of us. And I actually feel that we have to be part of this discussion. Looking at the work today, you know, of all of you, it's like we all understand how to make. And I think that that's really important, even if you're using the digital technology or innovation.
And thank you, Annette. One last question quickly from the Q&A or from our participants. But Margaret asks, fiber is ephemeral, so how long do you imagine your works existing or transforming? Such an important fibers question.
I went to go unmute it, it didn't work. How long do I imagine them existing? Honestly, not as long as a painting or something that I think most people are saying, oh, this is art, it's gonna last forever. I don't want it to last forever. What a burden. So how long do I see it lasting? Kind of an environmental way, hopefully around the same life as me. But how long do I see it lasting in kind of a artistic way? It's difficult because it is so malleable, and it's also like the environment actually does affect fiber a lot. It can yellow, it can you know, fade in the sun, or all sorts of things like that. So honestly, it's different every time that it's shown. Even just by putting it in a box and packing it and sending it somewhere else, it's not the same ever. It's kind of like each showing is just a photograph of something that's alive.
Definitely.
I think actually that's the beauty of textiles. It will fade, it will unravel, and it will have its own life. And I think I find that actually the most exciting, because it has a conversation with the environment and with us, and it talks about the vulnerability, and it talks about the ephemeral quality of it, but it talks about humanity, and I think we all know what it feels like. And as Reena was talking about, there is embodied knowledge we have with textiles. Everybody has that. And I think that that's really that's the most important. It doesn't have to be just the visuals. You know, when we were born, we were wrapped in cloth. When we die, we're being wrapped in cloth. I mean, but it will change. And we need to be ready for that change.
Definitely. Thank you so much to you all. I think we could probably fill an entire other textile talk with answers to these questions, but we will have to cut our conversation a little bit short. If you do have other questions for these artists, or you think of questions later, their websites and Instagram information is in the chat. So I encourage you to reach out to them directly and ask your questions there. So thank you all for coming today, and also thank you to our sponsors. Just a reminder that the recording of this talk and all others will be available on YouTube in the next week. And tune in next Wednesday for Textile Talks Full Circle, a conversation with artist and Olympian Grace Latz. And that is sponsored by the International Quilt Museum. So thank you so much again, and have a lovely afternoon, all of you.